Okay, let's get the meeting started, please. Start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. We are going to start with public audience. Please try and limit yourself to 5 minutes, and we'll try and move through this, and then we'll get on to the meeting. Sarah, you had your hand up first?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, excuse me one second. Tom? You
Yes.
have nobody taking...
We have it on, it will be recorded.
Recording, they'll do it from that?
transcribed.
Okay, fine. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Stand.
You can, your choice, whatever's most
Yes.
comfortable.
I'm Dave Ryan, 20 West Ledge Road. I'm the chairman of the zoning commission at this point. I'm coming here to repeat my comments before you earlier that I believe that it's appropriate to keep the zoning and planning commissions separate as they are today. They each serve very different functions. Planning does a long-range plan and plan of conservation development that takes a lot of work and effort, and they take care of the of the planning subdivision regulations. Zoning has the day-to-day responsibility for interpreting the zoning regulations and applying them, and it also has the responsibility to create them and enact them. And these are quite different functions. I think Rob Pomeroy, who was the preceding chairman to me, has come here and testified to the same effect. And Ferg Jansen, who was the planning chairman before the current Bill Rice, also came and testified to you. I was going to say I'd be happy to answer questions, but that's not the role here. I would just like to repeat that I think the way it has worked is very good. There were some in the years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, I was in the EDC. There was a lot of concern in those days because zoning and planning were taking every question and passing them back and forth and passing on them, and it was creating a mess and a delay to get something through. The chairman, Mike Bradley, probably around 2003 or 4, and of zoning, made the decision that we would do what is required by statute, but not more. And that has streamlined the process, and I believe that the number of applications processed and the delay in getting it done is not a real issue. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ryan. Any other members of the public?
Thanks, Dave.
Please, Mr. Caltern, please.
Thank you for allowing me to address the commission. I've been here and I spoke out, and I'm still in favor of the offer that the town council gave you, Mr. DeCrescenzo, Peter and Kelly Updike, and that's to reject it. Option 3, just reject it, do nothing, and just let it sit, and we won't do anything about it. But what I do like to comment on, I was going through some notes, and I came across Abraham Lincoln. And I thought, in due respect to both my senators, my Democratic senators, Mr. Blumenthal and Mr. Murphy, who are trying to change our Constitution, I'd like to say this, that Abraham Lincoln mentioned on April 6, 1859, "Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves, and under a just God cannot long retain it." And he goes on to say, "Charged with the duties of preventing and redressing all wrongs which are wrong to itself." And that's the best president, in my opinion, that ever served. And getting back to him, he came to Simsbury, and he was around Simsbury, and oddly enough, he was opposed, and the only people that opposed him were the Democrats from Simsbury. It's fact. It's in the record. And getting back to my theory on the charter, Here again, you're going to witness after me. One has testified already. They all have a dog in the fight. It's all self-serving. We went through the self-serving of the Economic Development Commission. Everyone that testified was for theirself. They don't care about the town. And then we have Mr. Ryan, the chairman from zoning. He comes in, and rather than recluse himself, he wants to influence your law, your charter. And he's telling you, we don't need planning, and we don't need what he's recommending, that he doesn't want to have those agencies. This is the recommendation that he's been beating this dog to death. And he served on the last Charter Revision Committee. And he was one, in my opinion, that was responsible for doing away with the constables. He was responsible for taking away the vote for the citizens and voting for the 1% or over 1% on the budget. And that's all he strives for, is to give him and his committee more power and to take all the power from the citizens. And what I'm saying is, I come before you, I take my testimony, previous testimony, and I urge you, truly, deny this thing. Don't approve of it. Throw it back to him, and let's try it from the start. Because that's all you're doing here, is you're taking the town manager concept, which is good, you're taking that concept and you're watering it down. You're bringing back the political influence into it, and that's all they're here for. They want to retain the political influence. They don't want to have a manager who's going to be politically orientated. He's going to do what's best for the citizens of Simsbury, not what's best for the Republican Party or not what's best for the Democratic Party, who incidentally appointed every one of you. And Mr. Rinaldi is right. If you really have interest in the town, work on the Board of Education. We've been living with that injustice where we don't have any rights. We don't even have a vote anymore. You have the vote. The town committee appoints who goes on to the Board of Education. It's a set thing. You have 4 to vote, and 4 is only 4. There's not 8. There's not 12. They don't even have the courtesy. We did one time. Mr. Rinaldi ran against the Board of Education. He ran against for 1 seat, and he wasn't, evidently he didn't have the proper funds, and that's another thing, the funding. I'm running for state representative. The state representative from the Democrat and the Republican parties both are going to receive over $60,000 to $80,000 in my money. And Mr. Rinaldi, when he ran for Board of Education, he had to use his own money. When the Board of Education people run, they're given money from the Republicans and they're given money from the Democrats. And you can't say no, you can't shake your head, you can't laugh at me. It's fact. And I urge you once again, take option 3, throw it back. We don't need any charter revision. Too many of them already. And I'll close with this. I'm not a carpetbagger. I served and I worked in the tobacco fields of Simsbury. And at the time I worked tobacco, there wasn't a charter in Simsbury until a few energetic people, carpetbaggers, who came into town and figured they got a good thing going. And they've been collecting, and they've been right in the public dole ever since. And I conclude. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Any other members of the public who would like to speak? Joan?
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. After listening to the discussion at the July 11th, 2016 Board of Selectmen meeting on the charter as presented to them with the town manager as the CEO of Simsbury, I was shocked at the unprofessional, childish display of First Selectman Lisa Heavner's rant against having a professional town manager in the town charter. She filibustered continuously about grieving for a change for a professional town manager. First Selectman Lisa Heavner is a prime example of why Simsbury should have a CEO in the position of a town manager as opposed to a soccer mom with no experience in public policy. First Selectman Lisa Heavner was concerned about hateful speech during public audience because she believes that questioning her unprofessional management skills is hateful speech. Having an agenda item public audience at all Board of Selectmen meetings is governed by a court order, not by First Selectman Lisa Hebner. First Selectman Lisa Hebner should be aware that speech is protected by the Constitution, and everyone has a right to express their views in a public forum. The resolution is displayed in the main meeting room of Town Hall under court order. The reason why nothing gets accomplished is because First Selectman Lisa Hebner believes that being liked by everyone is more important than providing leadership skills to move projects forward. First Selectman Lisa Hebner is and has been vehemently opposed to a town manager, although she lied when she stated that she was undecided about the form of government, as displayed in her eulogy for the demise of the First Selectman form of government. It is interesting to note that 3 previous First Selectmen, Peggy Shanks, Anita Millard, and Mary Glassman, all gave testimony in favor of a professional town manager. The Charter Revision Commission members at the Board of Selectmen meeting were very professional in describing their positions for and against the town manager and going along with a majority of vote of 7-4 for a town manager. The charter as presented is not a perfect document and will need to be tweaked in future years. The major change as CEO as a professional town manager should go forward to the Board of Selectmen and then forwarded to the Simsbury residents in a referendum vote. Thank you. And all of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co., newsfeed on Facebook, and Simsbury Forum Topics. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all the time that you spend getting the charter together.
Any other members of the public?
Yes, good evening. My name is Thomas Frank. I'm at 19 Banbury Drive, West Simsbury, Connecticut. I came to town about 16 years ago. With a background in business, I was the CEO of a $125 million company, very well known in the United States, and also CEO of a very large international organization, $350 million, $400 million in revenue. So I came kind of with a business perspective to this town. And what I've noticed about this town is that it requires a person with 2 sets of skills. One is a person with the spirit and the love and the devotion, the dedication to this community, which is just it's the most amazing place I've ever lived, and I've lived in a lot of places. So it requires a leader that knows and loves this town. But it also requires now, as budgets are getting bigger, the world's getting more complicated, there's more regulations. We also need a person that has management skills, significant inventories of management skills, to combine with the love and the devotion and the respect for what the ethos of this town is. That is a very, very rare combination of capabilities, very rare. And I'm a little bit concerned about the risk associated with having town committees to put up candidates for First Selectman and then have those First Selectmen run the town. Because there have been times in the past when we have had wonderful First Selectmen, and recently we've been really blessed to have superb First Selectmen that had both of those skill bundles. One sitting here right at this table, another one's an incumbent. But we haven't always been blessed with people that had those levels of skills. And in fact, I was very, 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 very upset last year when we had a candidate that could have won the election and could have been our First Selectman, who by almost anybody's standards did not have the background, the capability, the knowledge of the town, anything, didn't have any of the really significant criteria that you would want to have for somebody to run a town like this. So there's risk. So I just want to, again, support, as I once did earlier in a public audience, the idea of a town manager. If this group can put a really, really good professional manager together with another person or another body that has the other part of the skill set, the love and the devotion and dedication to the community, so that we would have a professional manager that can work hand in glove with people that know and love this town and have been in it for a long time, and who would be voted into office. The other thing I want to say, and I hope I'm not going over my 5 minutes, is I just want to I just don't want to take the risk ever again of not having the right person in that position. The other thing I wanted to say has to do with the Economic Development Commission. I had the privilege of serving on the Economic Development Commission several years ago. And in fact, I was the chair of it briefly, and then I had to resign because of professional commitments. And I didn't think the Economic Development Commission was as effective as it could have been for a lot of different reasons, but this much I do know. I did a little research, and I found somewhere in the state statutes or in regulations or something, I don't know where I found it, but I think it said something like this, that if the town is going to have, the state has said, if the town is going to have an Economic Development Commission, it has an obligation to create an economic development plan. I don't know if that's a legal requirement or not, but it kind of looked like it in the regulation that I read. And we haven't had an economic development plan that I know of since I've been here, since 2016. We just have not had a plan. And the more I think about economic development as a businessman, because that's what I am, fundamentally, I think we could put together a plan that would be uniquely tailored to this community, and I think we should. And I don't think we can do that if we don't have an Economic Development Commission with the charge to do that. I also feel very, very strongly.
Mr. Frank, I'm going to ask you to begin to wrap it up, please. You've hit your 5 minutes.
I beg your
So
pardon.
if you could wrap it up.
Can I wrap it up now?
Give me one sentence. Sum it all up.
Okay, the last sentence then would be, I would be in favor of retaining Economic Development Commission, but setting it up such that it has a new form of interaction with the Board of Selectmen so that it's more likely to get things done.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other members? Dr. Rinaldi.
Yeah, my name's Mike Rinaldi, 32 Pinnacle Mountain Road. The Charter Commission was convened for a particular reason. We had a group of selectmen a few years ago decided to change the form of government. So now we have to change the charter. And you people decided to recommend a town manager form of government, which is all well and fine. The problem is that this has to go to the voters on a referendum. I think the charter should be a clean charter, up or down. You want the hybrid form of government, which we have right now, which seems to work, or do you want a town manager form of government? And your recommendation would be a town manager form of government, which is all well and good. However, the voters are going to decide. Now, the problem is voters in this town are totally not educated about making that decision. In fact, they don't even know what's going on. So my recommendation to you is, first of all, just make the charter clean, up or down. Get rid of the other stuff. It shouldn't have been changed anyways. And because of those changes, maybe a few people might decide, oh, we don't like the EDC, therefore I'm going to vote against the charter. It should be a clean, up or down. You want a town manager? Yes or no? That's it. And we should educate the public. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, before the referendum, there ought to be a debate, a public debate, the pros and cons. Get 2 for town manager, 2 for hybrid. We got Mary Glassman here, and we got Lisa Hefner. They could debate it. You two could be on there and debate it. We could have even more to debate it. We'd have 3 and 3 or something like that. But you ought to tell us why you want to do this. And you ought to try to educate us and tell us why we should do it. Right now, this is insane what we're doing. We've tried to change things. We don't want this. We want to combine this committee. The reason we're here is because somebody did something which forced us to be here tonight. And therefore, that's the only reason we should be debating. Do we want a town manager or don't we want a town manager? Have a public debate, get Simsbury TV, we can get it at the high school auditorium, publicize it well, so that we can educate us so we make a correct decision. I'm not saying whatever decision we made is correct, but I don't think we can make a wrong decision, to be quite honest. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Rinaldi. Any other members of the public who would like to speak? Any other members? No? Okay, we're going to go to the committee. Normally, I do not make editorial comments as the chair. I'm going to make one now. I've heard the term soccer moms thrown about as a pejorative any number of times lately. I have worked with a lot of soccer moms who have gotten Connecticut laws changed. I've worked with a lot of soccer moms on committees, most of whom have formerly been attorneys, they've been educators, they've been business people, and I think using that term as a pejorative is disrespectful to all of them. That's my editorial comment. Thank you. Now, we will go. The first item on our action is combination of Planning Commission and Zoning Commission. We have been asked by the Board of Selectmen to review as to whether we want to make a change in our recommendation. Our current recommendation was not to make any changes, to leave them as separate bodies. So I will throw it open to the committee. Does anybody have any reason to want to make a change to combine those two committees? What, two commissions, I should say?
Well, I have a procedural question.
Sure.
I just want to know from our council whether, I want to thank everybody for their comments, and I want to know, can the Board of Selectmen send our recommendations to the voters separately, or does it have to go as a full report? So, that's my question.
Yeah.
I just think, in fairness to people who are here for one issue or another, do we have to lump it all as one question? Can it be separate questions? That influences how I vote.
Good evening.
Good evening, Bob. And how was your vacation?
It was very nice, thank you.
Good.
Heading out again on Thursday for a couple of days. I come back for...
Maybe I'll be a lawyer in my next lifetime.
Hopefully, we won't take the glow off your vacation too.
That wouldn't be possible.
Okay.
Not later after, I'm reading from the statute, 7-191 subsection D.
Okay.
Not later than 15 days after receiving the final report, the appointing authority, by majority of vote of its entire membership, as we talked about, that means 4 votes, shall either approve the proposed charter amendments or home rule ordinance, or reject the same, or separate provisions thereof. In other words, you have made, I think, 7 recommendations. The Board of Selectmen can say, we hereby approve the final report in its totality, all 7 recommendations, and send it on to the voters. Or they can say, we reject the final report in its totality, and absent a petition, that the whole process stops right there. Or they can say, we really like recommendations 1, 2, and 3, and we approve those. However, we reject 4, 5, and 6, and 7. Typically, and I say typically, this actually did come up recently at a meeting of the Connecticut Association of Municipal Attorneys, in another town also doing charter revision. This reject separate provisions thereof language is usually not invoked. It's usually the case, according to the collective wisdom of probably 30 or so municipal attorneys around the state, that the legislative body accepts the report or rejects the report. But the language says what it says. There's no way you can give full effect to this statute without reading or separate provisions thereof to mean that the legislative body may, in its wisdom, say, we don't like recommendation number 6 or 7, and we're only going to pass the first 5 on.
Okay, I guess amplifying on Mary's question, and addressing, actually, I think it was Dr. Rinaldi's question, can the items be put on the referendum separately as opposed to as these are the 4 that we're passing on, or can they be voted on separately? We're passing on item 1, item 3, item 5, item 7, and can those each be on the referendum as a separate item?
Yes.
Does it have to go to referendum?
Does what have to go to referendum?
Does the chart, if the Board of Selectmen accepts our recommendation, does it still have to go to referendum?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And is it a binding referendum?
Regardless, it has to go to referendum.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything they pass along has to go to referendum.
Yeah, Hadley, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your question. So, is it also a binding referendum, or is it advisory?
No, it's binding. What this statute, this is the Home Rule Act in Connecticut, and what this statute does is it sets up a procedure where in all things but charter, the
Board of Selectmen, by charter, is the legislative body of the town. Let's assume the town didn't have a charter. The legislative body of most towns, all towns without a charter, is the town meeting. This says there's a superseding legislative body, which is the referendum, that determines whether or not the charter will be accepted or rejected. Your final report as passed on by the Board of Selectmen. So the filter is, nothing gets to the Board of Selectmen that you don't recommend, and nothing gets to the voters that the Board of Selectmen doesn't recommend. And then the voters have the ultimate power to approve or reject whatever is sent to them. And then there's always that petitioning process. If the Board of Selectmen were to reject one of your recommendations, let's say for sake of argument, they reject the change of form of government item, which they can do, citizens can petition that back onto the ballot in November. Now, the question is raised one or more questions for the ballot. Subsection F of the same statute answers that question. The proposed charter shall be prepared for the ballot by the legislative body appointing authority and may be submitted in the form of one or several questions. And if approved by a majority of electors of the municipality voting thereon at regular election, or if approved by a majority which number equals at least 15% of the electors of the municipalities determined of the last completed registry, that 15% rule will not be in play this time because you're in a national election and your turnout's going to be probably high 90s, high 80s, low 90s. Shall become effective 30 days after such approval unless an effective date is specified therein in which the date or dates specified shall prevail. Now, your report does have an effective date which supersedes the statute. So one or more questions, if approved by the electors at an election, more than 15% vote in favor of it, then the charter becomes effective on the effective date in the draft.
That answer your question and yours? Okay,
It
thank
does.
you.
I just have one follow-up question.
Sure.
So, thank you. And I guess we don't control whether it goes to one question or, I mean, our work is done tonight.
Right.
We send the recommendations forward, and then the Board of Selectmen will make those decisions.
You do not. The Board of Selectmen passes a resolution, and in that resolution are the ballot questions, one or more. And they can group them any way they want.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Did you have a question?
No, I'll withdraw that.
Okay, thank you. So back to our question. Does anybody want to address the combination of Planning and Commission, Zoning Commission, or do we want to let it rest as our recommendation was originally?
I'm happy with the recommendation that we made.
Anyone?
Well, I think the vote was 9-2 on that.
I think it was 10-1. Might have been.
I think it was 10-1.
I think it was 10-1.
But two in favor?
Most were in favor,
Yeah.
but
I mean, the only thing
I wouldn't want to turn it
the only thing
over.
that gives me pause is, we have the Board of Selectmen, the people with the ear reportedly to the public saying, why don't you reconsider that issue? So we can just ignore that or take a run at it. I'm very worried about cluttering up this charter and not getting at the town manager. So I'm worried about that. But Jamie Rabbit was very persuasive to me when he came here and essentially told us that it would make life so much better, not only for staff, but for the town's ability to attract development. And that's one of the things I'm most interested in, is attracting development. Doing what I do for a living, the 4 meetings versus the 2 a month is a very, very expensive and big deal. And I like Mr. Rabbit's suggestion that when you have the same 2 entities on one board, you're not going to present something that conflicts with the other side because you're hashing it out in one meeting as opposed to 2. So my vote is still to combine them, whether we want to take another vote on it.
That would require a motion.
I mean, I'll move that we take another vote on it.
Do we have a second? Second, okay. Want a discussion?
I just wanted to follow up on that question. I think that if we are going to move the town manager or whatever form of government, if we're going to address that, I think it might be too confusing to do all those changes at the same time. I appreciate the conversation. I think it was, it's a tough issue because there's pros and cons on both sides. But I just think it's too much for me to move forward with tonight.
I agree with Mary on that point, and it gets back to, how much do you want to change all at once? And as I said at the Board of Selectmen meeting, the primary role or primary question is the town manager form of government. And while I'm still opposed to that, and I really haven't changed my mind on that, I do believe that that's the primary thing. We've made a couple of changes here that I think we can revisit, but I think the planning and zoning would be a major one, and I'm not willing to support that.
Anybody else?
I would say that given our original vote, and that there were only two of us in support of that, I agree with the cluttering the total argument. And while I think it's a good idea administratively, I would suggest not this time.
Yeah, and I just think for me, I won't rehash what everyone else has said, but I think in terms of, after listening to the last Board of Selectmen meeting that we were present and also hearing a lot of individuals that came before us, I agree. I think the town manager is the one area that needs to have the full focus on it, and all well and good to combine. I agree with your premise about decluttering from where we are, but I think it would almost be the opposite of cluttering really where the essence is of what we were charged to do. So I think in light of those that did speak, I'm taking into context of where they are coming from, because then that's also another area that could be looked at another time once we have this initial town manager portion taken care of.
I'm all in favor of taking the clutter out, keeping it clean. I think it's extremely important. And you set a precedent by doing that. That says basically we're going to leave the EC in, we're not going to change culture and rec. We're just going to focus on the one issue, which I'm fine. I'm okay doing that. But I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. You're kind of setting precedent. That's what we want to do. Great.
Are we ready for a vote? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to change our recommendation to combining the two commissions. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hands. All those opposed? Okay, the motion is defeated. How many do we have? 2, 4, 6, 7, 1 to 6. Thank you. Moving on, next, the removal of the Economic Development Commission from the charter. The Board of Selectmen did ask us to relook at this. There was a lot of discussion on their part during the course of the meeting. There's been a lot of discussion on our part. So I'm throwing it open to the commission. Anybody want to make a comment on it? Mary, please.
Yeah, thank you. I changed my mind on this after the last meeting with the Board of Selectmen. I was the only one who voted not to remove it, and now I changed my mind. I think that the point that the Board of Selectmen made and that all of you made was that if the charge of the Economic Development Commission is to work closer, I think I heard comments earlier, work closer with the Board of Selectmen. There was a lot of conversation about why, if we had an Economic Development Commission, why do we appoint an Economic Development Commission task force? That didn't really make sense. And I thought a lot about that, and I think it's because the Board of Selectmen didn't feel that the Economic Development Commission was effective. And I think if the Board of Selectmen wants to appoint people who they want to be on the Board of Selectmen, I think it's their right, because they shouldn't have to accept the work of people who've been appointed 5 years before they get on the Board of Selectmen. So I guess I would consider a discussion about not removing it from the charter, but changing it, saying the Economic Development Commission can be appointed by the Board of Selectmen for a term of co-terminus with the Board of Selectmen. That may keep it in the charter, so it wouldn't scare people that we were taking it out and losing it, because I think we explained that to the Board of Selectmen and they understood. But it wouldn't lock it in as appointments that could go on for long periods of time and not be cohesive with the Board of Selectmen. So I just throw that out as a compromise and as for discussion. But I do think we have to do something with it because it's not
Well, I think, as I recall, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, we had discussion with the Board of Selectmen saying that this could be something done by statute, this could be an ad hoc committee when the Board of Selectmen felt it was necessary. So my inclination is to go that route as opposed to figuring out a new way to put it into the charter with new limits on terms and all that kind of thing. So my inclination is to I think we made our position fairly clear, that we wanted some form of economic development in the town. Certainly we weren't walking away from it, but that we felt that the charter was not the right place to have that particular body. So and I still kind of agree with that position.
So to kind of repeat my previous comment, keep it clean.
Right.
The one thing we did do, we stirred up a hornet's nest, and we got a lot of people looking at this, and a lot of people, a lot of conversation. I think the consensus, and even attending the Board of Selectmen meeting where, my apologies, the member of the board, the representative of EDC, what should the mission be? What do you really think? I mean, there was acknowledgement from the board that the EDC is not working as effectively as it should be. And we've raised that issue. And the whole economic development process across the town board is extremely important. EDC is a piece of that. Where does it fit? What is its role? What should it be doing? How should it be staffed? How does it interact with everything else? Those are all the issues we've raised. And, the Board of Selectmen, it's up to them to really figure out what they want to do. Now, to keep it clean, we could leave the EDC in here, let the Board of Selectmen go back and finally hash that out. And that would, again, not clutter the vote come November, which I'm all in favor of doing. But at the same time, this issue is one that everybody acknowledges is broke and it needs to be we've taken a look at. So if we had some sort of commitment for the board, we are going to take a serious look at this, and we are going to try to figure out how best to leverage an EDC going forward. But I'd be in favor of leaving it in.
Ed, please.
I support what Bob just said, but I would also reemphasize what the gentleman just told us earlier. You can't have this kind of an organization go forward without a plan. I think that we should include a comment to mandate the development of a plan and not clutter up.
I do think we've kind of indicated to the Board of Selectmen that that is a gap and that they have to address it.
Maybe that's our specific direction.
Yeah. And I mean, my feeling is still that it doesn't need to be a charter situation, that it can be, whether it's by statute or ad hoc committee. I just think it's an unnecessary part of the charter. But that's my feeling. So if somebody wants to, any other discussion on this at all?
Yeah,
Paul.
Lydia, go ahead. Lydia, you want to talk?
Yeah, I think the one question here too, just looking at this, the board at the last joint meeting, questioned whether more specific direction. I think it goes back to what you were saying about the direction of the EDC. Now, reading that, the specific direction of the EDC doesn't necessarily come from the Charter Commission. I mean, that's not really our charge. That would be a charge coming from the Board of Selectmen with a plan of action or a plan of reform or a long-range plan coming. That is a totally separate area. So I keep going back to specific direction, to EDC. Who gives specific direction? What is direction? And I think we've also heard from residents that spoke, in favor of EDC, and also those involved with EDC, give us a different direction to move us forward if we were to retain that commission. So I keep listening. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to ask Council a question. In here, in the way what was struck talks about the powers and duties not inconsistent with the charter as are new or may be inferred imposed by Section 7. I think it's 1-36 of the Connecticut or of the general statutes. I'd like a little clarity on exactly what that means, what their duties are, and what powers they have before I actually reconsider that.
Sure.
I don't think that's a bad idea what you said, but
It keeps it in.
what is it?
I didn't bring the statute with me,
Okay, sorry, Bob.
Oh, that's okay.
So much for his vacation, Glow.
I did not try to do that intentionally.
No, that's okay.
That's fingertips.
It's at my finger.
While you're doing that, I'm not necessarily opposed to putting it back in based upon some of the comments that we had, but I am a little bit concerned about, the direction they had been going recently and what duties they thought that they had and the amount of staff time that they were taking up. So I'd like a little clarity on exactly what that would do. I mean, we had talked about an ordinance. That's still a viable option, I think, and actually gives the Board of Selectmen more control, I believe, than if they're actually in the charter. But the problem is it's become perception that by people who are on EDC by saying, oh, well, Simsbury isn't interested in economic development any longer. I don't think that's the case.
No, I think we've made that
And we don't have a
clear.
problem with development. We got, 18 gazillion apartments going in town? So something's happening here.
And while he's looking that up, if in fact we vote to maintain the current situation, where we don't want to put EDC in the charter anymore, we can certainly, once again, recommend very strongly in the final report, which is going to have to be reworded, some of the recommendations we've made about that if they make it a statutory body.
It's crossed out,
that
so
the Board of Selectmen really has to get
7-136,
involved and give them direction and stay on top of them. And we put that in our report as well. Because we're going to rewrite the report to some degree, because it's only really a draft now anyway.
Right.
So when we finalize it, that can certainly be in there very strongly. We can emphasize that.
While he's looking that up, should we just table this and look at the cultural charter or the culture? You want to do that, or Bob, you think it's going to?
It's not loading very quickly.
Okay, so let's,
Ran down to get it, so
Yeah.
maybe.
okay, let's put this on the back burner for a few minutes. Okay. And let's move on to the addition of the Cultural Commission to the town charter. We have made the recommendation, splitting it off from Parks and Rec. And I got the impression from the Board of Selectmen during the meeting that they were very open to that suggestion. And does anybody have any comments on that?
I think we won them over on it.
Yeah.
So I think
so.
it was pretty clear.
So does anybody, there's no motion to change that? We'll leave it as is?
I think we're good.
Okay. I would say this, before, the next item is the form of government. I would say we kind of wait. Is Tom going to get a
Yeah,
copy
he's
of the
going to.
CGS?
Let me start by saying the charter incorporates the statute, but under home rule, you can create a economic development commission in the charter that doesn't reference the statute. No prohibition against having an economic development commission created by charter. Secondly, as has been mentioned, if you take it out of the charter, the Board of Selectmen could readopt it in whatever form they choose by ordinance. Or third option, as you mentioned, is to create it as an ad hoc committee that's coterminous with the Board of Selectmen. There's probably half a dozen of those. So there's some options here. I don't want anybody to think that if the town of Simsbury believes that their Economic Development Commission needs to have unique powers and duties than those spelled out in the statute, I believe the town has the authority, power to do that. It's a matter of strictly local concern, what your Economic Development Commission should be, how constituted, and what tasks it should be given to undertake. The Economic Development Commission statute, which we'll read in very shortly, is an enabling legislation for those towns that don't have charters. They can take advantage of the outline in the statute, but they're not required to do so.
And Bob, I would also think that based on the comment, let's take a look at this first.
This just got handed to me.
Newsflash.
Fresh out of WikiLeaks.
This talks about an ordinance. Any town, city, or borough by ordinance may accept the provisions of this section and may establish an economic commission for the promotion and development of the economic resources of such municipality. The ordinance ordinance, shall specify number of members, whether the members shall be elected or appointed, the terms, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, how you handle vacancies. B, the commission shall conduct research into the economic conditions and trends in its municipality, shall make recommendations to appropriate officials and agencies of the municipality regarding action to improve its economic commission and development, shall seek to coordinate the activities of and cooperate with the unofficial bodies organized to promote such economic development, and may advertise and may prepare, print, and distribute books, maps, charts, pamphlets, which in its judgment will further its purposes. The Commission shall annually prepare and transmit to the legislative body of its municipality a report of its activities and recommendations for improving such economic conditions and development. D, any municipality which establishes an economic development commission may annually appropriate for its purposes a sum not exceeding 1/20th of 1% of the last completed grand list of taxable property. Well, the grand list of taxable property doesn't produce a sum, so that's a little bit difficult to read. I think what they mean by the shall appropriate an amount not exceeding 1/20th of 1% of the, well, I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. 1/20th of 1% of the last completed grand list produces a number. And what's the grand list?
And you'd put the grand list is over $1 billion, and then you'd put the mill rate against it,
Well,
so.
it doesn't say anything about mill rate. It says, that's why I'm confused. 1/20th of 1%, so $4 billion grand list, the 1% would be $4 million. 1/20th of 1% would be, what, $80,000, $800,000?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
It's a very big number. Anyway, that's what the statute says.
It's 40 million. It's a lot. It's more
a
than
lot.
they need. It's more than they need.
Statutory.
Let's leave it at that.
And that talks about money appropriated to the commission. It doesn't talk about other ways of spending money on behalf of.
Thank God they've never asked for it. Okay, all right. Anything else?
No, here's the, but you're not bound by that. That talks about an ordinance that towns may take advantage of. It doesn't talk about charter.
One of the things, based on the comments that the Board of Selectmen were making at the last meeting, I would be shocked if we told them, if we wanted to drop this out, that they wouldn't, in fact, and it got passed by the voters, obviously, I would be shocked if they wouldn't set up a committee by ordinance, because they also obviously indicated a strong desire to have something going through the town as an economic development, something. So I'd be shocked if they would just say, okay, we're going to ignore it. I think we all want something. We just don't know whether we want it in the charter. Mary?
I'm just going to ask, this may be silly, does it make sense, getting to Bob's point about keeping it in the charter, not to ruffle too many feathers, but relating it to an ordinance? So, for example, you would say, there shall be an Economic Development Commission in the town of Simsbury established by the Board of Selectmen by ordinance.
An easy way to do that would be to amend the existing language where it references the statute and just say, powers and duties of such commission shall be established by ordinance by the Board of Selectmen.
So we would really take it out, but for all intents and purposes, we would keep it in to show it's important. But we wouldn't specify, we'd throw it back to the Board of Selectmen to specify.
Which is where it's.
Right.
So that would kind of override the charter?
No, the ordinance would have to be consistent with the charter, but if all you're doing is saying there shall be an Economic Development Commission with powers and duties and membership as established by ordinance, the Board of Selectmen would be obligated to adopt or propose and adopt such ordinance. It would be up to them to define the powers, duties, and membership of it.
And the term as well?
And what?
And the term as well?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm coming in late, I know.
They could change the ordinance frequently if the need changes, let's say
If conditions of the town change.
more easier than you could change the charter.
Yeah, I think that would probably be consistent with some of the testimony that we've heard from various people and what we heard at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Read that language.
I know where we're going.
Okay.
Of course, this means we're going to have one more meeting,
You're already scheduled to have
To vote
one
on it.
Monday anyway. You make any change, you're going to need another meeting.
Right. Is one scheduled
I
for
got
Monday?
nothing, I got nothing to do next Monday, so I'm good.
God, unfortunately.
It's up to you guys. If you guys want to keep it in, then we have another meeting.
That sounds like
have
a
it.
good compliment.
Yeah, we're-
We have it scheduled.
I don't know.
We have it scheduled.
Yeah, we could always cancel it, yeah, so we're going to, we'll bring this back at the next meeting to kind of, is that what we're talking about? Bring this one issue back?
Yeah, I think they could probably give us the appropriate language to put in that would reflect what we were talking about.
And, yeah, because we'll need.
And
we'll need
basically
that
what
meeting
you're
to
doing is
approve
you're
the
saying there
final
shall be
version.
an Economic
I
Development
think we can
Commission.
craft that sentence right now. Absolutely.
Right.
You think you can?
We don't have
Okay,
to
well,
draft one
if they
sentence.
can, yeah.
We have enough lawyers
Give
on
them-
the.
We'll give it 2 minutes, and then by the time we finish,
I think we can handle that.
At least, no more meetings.
I'm not here next week.
Okay, so while they're working on that,
We're gonna miss you.
we took care of the Culture Commission. We are on to form of government. We're on to form of government. The Board of Selectmen asked a number of questions. They wanted us to clarify a number of issues, among some compensation, et cetera. Does anybody have any comments on what the Board of Selectmen asked about, Tom?
The only thing we should change is the stipend issue. That's all I would recommend changing. I was in favor of the position being unpaid, still am. I think it should be expense reimbursement. Finish it off that way, then there's no chance of the first select person being recused voting on the town manager's salary. I think that the Board of Selectmen were talking about just making it a flat amount, but how's that going to stay stagnant year to year to year? So I don't think the person that eventually wants to be the first select person is going to be dissuaded because they only get their expenses covered. So I would suggest we just have expense reimbursement like everybody else, and that would be the only change I would make to the town manager provision.
I understand. There's an overarching thing to me personally. I think the fact that we're reducing it to a stipend or reimbursement for expenses, I think that limits your pool as to the first selectman altogether. But that's one of the reasons I was opposed to it. But,
I mean,
but expenses of stipend doesn't change me either. You know, I don't see a problem either way if that's the way the board's going to go, or that's the way the commission's going to go. Melissa?
Probably, and again, I apologize if I'm coming in late and
Sure.
there's something I've missed. But, we sat through a lengthy meeting with the Board of Selectmen, whatever that was, and there were some very pointed questions about whether we had considerated, wow. Sorry, long day, whether we had considered the option of maintaining true first selectman form of government with the codification essentially of a chief administrative officer. And we all know what we did here, but to the extent that that was a pointed question by the Board of Selectmen, I think that it does warrant further discussion among us as a collective commission before we just unilaterally move ahead without considering that which we have been asked to consider.
I thought we pretty much disabused them of the reality. I thought we answered that question. Their question was, didn't you consider a hybrid form with a chief administrative officer? And we actually said, yes, we did, many times, many meetings. Watch the tapes.
That's what our matrix was.
Watch the tape. Watch the tape. I mean, we want to have the same discussion that we had for 15 meetings? Really?
I think that to the extent that we've been asked by the Board of Selectmen to at least have a discussion about it, I think we need to have that discussion and decide whether that makes any sense, or specifically go through the process of elucidating that we're not selecting that form of government. That, just to put it on record, that we have made that collective decision among ourselves, that we've taken the vote, that this option was considered, and that we did reject it and we continue to reject it. I think we need to say, I think we owe it to the Board of Selectmen, who took their time to ask us to meet right now to do that. So we should do that.
Mary, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just, in following up on Melissa's question, I said at the last meeting with the Board of Selectmen that I saw this conversation as a continuum, that we were at the first selectman, who was the full-time chief administrative officer, and we have the town manager who's at the other end, and was there some other place that the town felt comfortable and the Board of Selectmen felt comfortable that we could be and still do both, protect the town and still protect the democracy? That was the conversation. So I think we should have that conversation. I also would like to see this question go to the voters. And I'm concerned maybe, I don't know, the Board of Selectmen wasn't there. So I don't know how the majority of the board feels. But I think it's important that something go to the voters that's not what we currently have, which is first selectman runs the town. That's what we have. We put in place some administrative checks and balances, but it's not in the charter. First selectman can come in and get rid of it. We saw first, Board of Selectmen could change it, So my question is to protect the town. Where are we on the continuum? Where do we need to be on the continuum so that it gets through this commission, so it gets to the Board of Selectmen, and it gets to the voters? So I don't know. I just thought we probably should at least have a conversation about that.
Tom, you were going to say something?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we voted on the hybrid form of government first at that meeting. And now and that lost 4-7. And now we're going to talk about it again?
You asked me to correct you asked to be corrected if you were wrong. I think that what we voted on was very specific statutory language about a particular type of hybrid form of government. And then I think we had a vote on the conceptual idea of a town manager form of government. And I think that we discussed and voted on a statutory set of language, and we discussed and voted on a concept. And never did we discuss or vote on the hybrid concept.
But wasn't the statutory concept a chief administrative officer and a first select person? That was the...
No, but that was the statutory, there was very specific statutory language that had been proposed. And I not only voted against the town manager form of government, I voted against the very specific statutory language that was proposed for the hybrid form of government. We did not vote on the concept of a hybrid form of government before we moved on to the concept of a town manager. And once we passed the town manager concept, that's when we turned our attention to very specific statutory language.
Going back to Ed's comment, we put that whole matrix in place to allow us to get focused on what were the important decisions that needed to be made by the CEO of the town, and Bob gave us that list. And we said then, who do we want making those decisions? And in both instances, the hybrid and the town manager, we said we wanted the professional manager to make those decisions. The only difference in the hybrid was that the CEO remains the first selectman, which creates all sorts of questions and issues about who's in charge, who makes the final decisions, how are things going to be run? Could we be in a position where the CEO starts to micromanage that professional manager, questions his decisions? If an HR problem comes up, the person could go back behind them and say, hey, I didn't like the way I got evaluated, so can you help me out? It's messy. And no one, I don't want to say no one, I don't think you would look at that and say that's a good way to run a government. The town manager we all looked at and says, hey, it's clear, it's understood who's in charge, who's making the decisions, who's got the authority, and that's what we voted on. So we did look at the hybrid, we did analyze it, and I think the conclusion we came to was that's not an effective and efficient way to run a town. The more efficient and effective way to run a town is through a town manager. Because those really we have three choices, right? We could go back to the first selectman form, which we said, no, we've already, to Tom's point, we've already evolved. We've already started that evolution. We've already got professional management introduced to the town. So we really only have two options left. And the hybrid is a messy and creates lots of questions where the town manager is much cleaner. It's straightforward. We know who's in charge. That's what we discussed. That's what we analyzed. And that's why we came up with a 7-4.
But I don't think that we had a vote on the concept of that.
I think we did.
I don't think we voted on the concept.
Yes, well, to Tom's point earlier, yes, we did. We voted.
I think we did. I think we voted
By voting on a
that.
town manager, you mean?
No. The first vote was for the hybrid. And we voted.
The first vote, maybe I'm completely misremembering things, but the first vote was about specific statutory language around the hybrid form of government. There was a specific statutory language. There's a statute that was drafted that was pulled from another form.
I made that motion.
Right.
Okay, and the what I did is I took various pieces of other town charters that had a chief administrative officer, and then that's what we voted on. As a, here's what the duties of the chief administrative officer are. I think, Bob, I think you had worked on some language. I can't remember whether you had worked on some language that we then brought forward, and that was the motion that I brought forward. Okay, and it was defeated, 7-4.
And that was hybrid.
That was the hybrid. That's what I call the hybrid.
I voted against that language because I was voting against the statutory language that had been proposed, not the concept itself. But I think that, looking back to what we did and whether we voted this way or that way on this concept or this statute is perhaps not the point. I think the point is right now the Board of Selectmen has asked us to have this discussion and revisit the concept of a chief administrative officer. And I think that to the extent that we've been willing to do that on these other items that the Board of Selectmen asked us to look at, they asked us to look at the EDC, they asked us to look at planning and zoning, and they asked us to look at culture and the form of government. I think we just have that discussion and move forward. I think one point that Mary just brought up, which it hadn't crossed my mind, but one thing that she pointed out is that she's not confident that the Board of Selectmen would pass the pure town manager form of government recommendation onto the voters. And that her main concern, tell me if I'm paraphrasing correctly, your main concern is making sure that the town's protected from liability and that we not return to exactly what we have now, because that does not solve the problem that we have now. So, thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that having sat there with the Board of Selectmen 2 weeks ago, or whenever that was, I only heard one person on the board pushing against town manager. I didn't hear anybody else.
Just clarification, 2 people weren't there.
Right.
That's why
There
I'm
was only
concerned that there was only...
There were 2.
One person that spoke not in favor of it, and 2 that we couldn't tell, but that's why I'm concerned. That's why I raised it. Yeah. We can ignore it, send it forward. I thought we should have a conversation about it.
I mean, I guess, Melissa, you're hot for the issue, so why don't you...
I'm not hot for the issue. I'm saying we should have the discussion. We've been asked to have the discussion.
Someone's got to lead it. I don't want to lead it. Do you want to lead it? Do you want to lead it? You got to lead it.
I go back to it. I think we did.
Yeah.
That whole matrix discussion, that was the analysis that we did, and that's why we got focused on, what was really important. What was important was who do we want making these decisions? And what was interesting at the end was, in both cases, we said we want professional management making that decision. The only difference in the 2 forms then is who's the CEO. And the town manager is clearly understood. And that's the analysis we went through, and that was the discussion that we had, and I think we did. And I think what I heard last at the Board of Selectmen meeting was, and I actually came to a board meeting and tried to present that matrix, and Joan was there timing, I don't know. I'm not sure they understood it. I'm not sure they wanted to listen to it. I didn't see, I think there's one person on the board who clearly is not in favor of it. She happens to be a very strong person, but I don't see us changing that recommendation.
I think, according to this, we did answer, we did suffice what their request is, because the board questioned whether other alternative forms of government were thoroughly considered.
We did.
And we did consider that, number 1. I'm just reading from what Lisa wrote. Whether testimony from towns that rejected the town manager form of government had been taken and questioned. And then the third is just details of the proposed town manager revisions to the charter, such as the stipend, which we were on discussion.
And I just realized we have heard from people who rejected the town manager form of government. Simsbury did for the last 5 charters, so we even covered that one.
Touche.
Yeah, I did want to just parenthetically, what I did want to say is we have made an effort to get some people from towns that had either rejected or gone back from a town manager to the selectmen body who had never been interested in it. And we were unfortunately unable to get anybody here for our meeting next week, which is why we kind of thought we didn't have to have one next week, but now maybe we do. But we have been making the effort to get some people in there, so I wanted the Board of Selectmen to know that. We have made that effort. Yes, Ed.
I'm personally opposed to inviting that kind of a person. And my rationale for that is, if you're trying to build a team, you bring in a consultant who's a winner, you don't talk to losers where it failed. And reasons for failure in any town could be so varied, politics, whatever gamesmanship goes on, and that's never going to come through testimony of one individual.
No, but I was also trying to get people from towns that had rejected it to begin with, that had never had it, and to bring in towns that actually were very comparable to ours, just to get a different perspective, because that was one of the questions that the Board of Selectmen asked us. Had we brought anybody into that nature, and we hadn't for whatever reason. So we're just trying to kind of remedy that aspect of it. Well,
The one thing, and this discussion's healthy, I think, going back and forth. And one of the reasons that I've been opposed to a town manager form of government is who is the person responsible to the voters? Who's going to have their feet held to the fire? And I understand the town manager might be cleaner, might be more efficient. It's just, as far as I'm concerned, the first selectman, when backed up with professional management, which I think is the direction we've been going, is a lot more accountable to the voters than having 4 people on a board of selectmen. Okay? Having said that, all right, I think we're too far down the process to reconsider what we've done. I mean, I think it would be a travesty if all of a sudden we said, look, we're going to go in the direction of maybe a chief administrative officer, or we're going to go back to and just not do anything, which I never suggested, by the way, at that point. So as much as I think it's accountability, who's accountable? Bring it forward to the Board of Selectmen and let them decide. If they want to move forward with it and put it in the voters, go for it. I heard some speakers say that, people don't know what's going on. Well, I mean, this is on SCTV. It's played like 18 times a week on SCTV, everything that we do. We've had the Hartford Current here. We've had other reporters here. I don't know what more you could do to except, send some, and maybe that's not a bad idea, as like the Board of Ed does when it comes time for referendum, and the Board of Selectmen, you send something to the voters in the mail. Snail mail still works, and do it that way so that they know. Maybe they have one more public hearing in September or October before a vote. That's probably not a bad idea, and let's see who comes. I mean, we've had public hearing notices go out, and we get 5 people come. So I think from that standpoint, we should probably just move forward with it and let them decide what they want to do with it. So that's what I have to say on that.
But going back now to the stipend recommendation, I mean, is that something?
We do need to address that.
We do have to
so
address
that is
that. That was a legitimate complaint regarding tying it into a percentage of the town manager's salary.
Well, here's a question. Could you kind of overcome that by making it that when they vote on the town manager's salary, that the first select person's stipend does not go into effect until the next term, which doesn't necessarily mean it's the person voting on it. Would they have to recuse themselves?
No.
If it's for the next term?
No. I think if you, I could just say no, I think we should do that. It would avoid a lot of the confusion we've had in the past. I also think that we should separate it from the town manager and let the Board of Selectmen determine what the stipend will be for the next term of the first one.
The only I agree right up to that last point about letting the Board of Selectmen decide, because then next thing you know, you could have a first selectman who's popular, and the 4 members of their party say, geez, I think Joe's worth $70,000, $100,000, $125,000. Or it's the other way around. There's 4, and they're not of the same party, and they say, we really think you're doing a crappy job. You're only worth $2,000.
But that's what they did.
We're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, but Mary, in all
And they
fairness,
did
no,
midterm.
wait. In all fair, okay, let me address that then. Thank you for bringing that up. They had the Erdman study. They had the Erdman study, which was commissioned by the Board of Selectmen, supported by the first selectman. And it also made a recommendation. The recommendations were accepted. The one thing that ruffled feathers was that it was done during that term, which don't necessarily agree. I think it probably would have been smarter to do it at the next election, but it didn't happen. You know, it created a lot of consternation. I don't think we need to replay that, but I think we want to avoid that again. We want to avoid a mistake. Learn from our, if I would, just then I'll turn it over to you.
Of course.
Is learn from our mistake, okay, and make it clear how that's done. And if we put a fixed amount in, let's say, you know, I think we had talked about a percentage.
I think we took
okay?
15%.
Which worked out to, we made an estimate that how much it would be, $15,000, okay? Make it 10, make it 15, and say, that's the amount, and then but it can be changed at the next charter. Because we're going to be doing this every 5 years, right? So that would be a suggestion.
Just before you go, Bob, there's no necessity of having a charter revision commission every 5 years, right? 7 years. Every 7?
7.
Okay, so you're thinking of maintaining a percentage for 7 years.
Throw an inflation kicker in on
Yeah,
it.
whatever. Okay.
I would
Melissa?
agree, put in a fixed amount, but tie it to a COLA. So there'd be a COLA increase every year.
Yeah,
You could do that.
an inflation amount.
So instead of the 15%, we could kind of
Adjust it for cost
pick a
of
number
living.
this year and then going forward type of thing and call it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's
15%.
that's another way to do it.
Okay, I'm really bad at math. It's why I went to law school, not business school. But 15 of 100 is 15,
Mm-hmm.
and then so we pretend we're probably going to pay 150. Half of that would be 22.
Yeah, so it's 22.5.
22.5.
I think you could do it. I would be comfortable either way. Whether but the key to me would be it doesn't change until the next election cycle. That's the key to me. So
That was the
so if
point I was
somebody
trying to
does
make.
right. Well, that's it. So this way they don't have to recuse themselves. You can get the entire board voting on it as opposed to them recusing themselves. So does anybody have any real preference as to which direction we go with that? What our recommendation would be? Anybody?
Somebody wanna make a motion?
Somebody want to make a motion of a recommendation?
Tom, did you make a recommendation?
Well, I'll move that it's compensation to the first select person is reimbursement of expenses only. I'll make that motion to start it.
He wants to make a recommendation, expenses only.
What section did we have?
Any second?
I'll second.
Okay, second, any discussion on it?
I think that it has to be significantly more than that. I mean, state legislators that are part-time make more, and this isn't really part-time. It would be a lot more involved locally, I think.
More than, you're to say more than a stipend.
I think so.
Right.
No, more than
More than expense.
Oh, well, that's what
So-
I'm sorry, yes, more than expenses,
Yeah.
right.
Expenses.
I agree.
Why would you, I just want to ask it, maybe I don't have a clear understanding of it. Why would you just leave it at expenses only, or?
I think it eliminates any wiggle room on the conflict of interest and having the first select person potentially having to recuse themselves because of anything that could tangentially relate to how much money they're going to make. That would be number one. And number two, I'm just impressed with the West Hartford model, which is uncompensated expenses only. You know, and I think the Scotts Lifkas of the world live in this town too. I do.
Right, we didn't hear from I'm just going back, maybe.
Canton had I thought he had a
Canton,
fixed
she has a
amount.
stipend, or the person in that position has a $5,000 stipend.
It's 15,000, but
Yeah.
you're correct, there is a stipend.
There is-
15?
I'm sorry,
Okay,
15?
15, thank you.
All right, it's 15,000. It is a smaller town. I happen to know her personally. But it is that. And yes, you know what? It is a smaller town, but it is still considerable number of hours that that person has to serve in that position. I'm not sure what the other town, maybe you have a better idea of the other towns, Tom? I mean, I don't have a good handle on it. Right, but I
I would
think.
point out Canton is a hybrid. It's not a town manager form of government.
Right, but
So he's got to do things in that town.
The others at Mansfield,
yes.
they do not pay the mayor. He does not get a salary. He doesn't get.
Doesn't receive.
Didn't receive anything when Matt Hart spoke to us.
Yes, I do remember, but I just was curious what the other positions in other towns, whether they be stipend, expense only, or percentage of where they are, but
No, go ahead.
I think that the stipend for me removes people who can afford to run and people who can't afford to run. You know, it costs money to, you know, go to events, and I think if it's a little more than just expenses, then it might attract more people to run. That's all I'm thinking.
I tend to agree with Mary. I understand. We agree on a lot of things. You misquote me all the time.
Sitting together a lot over there.
I do think there has to be some amount that can attract some people, and it makes sense to have something that is, you know, you're not going to make a living on it, but it also recognizes the sacrifices you're putting in for additional meetings during the week or meetings at night. I mean, we do have a lot of volunteers, but this position is more than just being the volunteer. So, I would support having some amount in there, subject to a COLA, that would take it out of the hands of you know, having a conflict of interest, but yet would be clean enough in the charter.
And I'm not adverse to that, but I have a sense and a belief that some Board of Selectmen members are going to use that and say, we're spending now more money. And that's going to be the rallying call to defeat the town manager. They're going to say, we've got to pay $140,000 to town manager, and we're paying a first selectman $25,000. So look, the Charter Revision Commission has passed on an extra $100,000 of costs. That's going to be the rallying call. I can tell you that's going to be the rallying call. But I would not oppose, some money, because I do agree that it's a lot of daytime, like nighttime. I get that totally, but just for the viewing audience, that's what you're going to hear is it's costing more money, and that's going to be the rallying call to try and knock this.
Tom, I don't disagree with that if it was substantially more. I don't think that would be enough to do that. But I understand your point. I just don't think that would be enough to create that kind of successful argument.
And hopefully the town manager would be so efficient that he would save us more than that amount of money. So there you go. Anybody else on the idea of expenses only? Any other discussion? Okay, call for a vote. All those in favor?
Well, we don't have a motion on the table.
Yeah, I didn't make a motion.
Oh, you made, that one, back to that one.
It's about to go down. I'm for 3 tonight.
On this one.
We can save you the
I don't like this. I don't like this.
We can save you the embarrassment.
Vote for your own
Don't you want to
motion.
withdraw?
No, I can't. I can't withdraw it.
All
I'm on
those
the
in
street.
favor, please signify by raising your hands. We have 3. All those opposed? Goes down 5-3.
Very close.
Okay, do we have a motion now in terms of the
Better than I
stipend?
thought.
Some sort.
I move that we specify a salary for the first selectman of $22,500 annually to be adjusted by cost of living adjustments annually.
Do you have a second?
A second.
Second, by Mary, move discussion.
I'd like to know where all of a sudden you came up with 22.5. That's very specific.
I
That's
know where it
exactly
is.
15% of 150,000. If my
I
math
thought-
is right.
Right, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking
We were
originally
talking
about
about the stipend being
15%
15%.
of the.
Yeah, but I had in my mind that was 15,000.
Then you were only going to be paying the town manager 100?
You were paying, or paying.
You're
10%.
worse at math than I am.
We're saving
I'm
money.
being conservative.
Right, you were the chair of Board of Finance?
Conservative. So I was being very conservative.
Yeah.
Optimistic, I think.
I think we have to watch out. We can't call it salary, right? Stipend.
Sorry, a stipend.
Stipend.
Stipend, right.
Friendly amendment to my own motion to rephrase that, to call it a stipend, an
Accepted,
annual
seconder?
stipend.
Okay, fine.
With
You
no
wanna
other
amend your
benefits.
motion to be 15,000?
No other benefits associated therewith.
You want to amend your motion to be 15,000?
No.
Okay.
So really, isn't it
I'd go to 20.
just to coach on? Just
How about
to coach-
17.5?
Melissa, just a coach on the friendly amendment, should we pull out exactly what we said and then just change it from percentage to?
Section 411,
So we can,
First,
so we can get it right done.
first paragraph.
Sorry, I came directly from, without my.
Okay. 50%. Equal to, okay, just change 15%
receive an annual
of the annual
stipend
ballot. Okay.
Equal,
What
uh,
page you on?
an annual stipend
15.
of $22,500
Plus
annually.
expenses.
Plus expenses, comma, but not including any other benefits.
Well,
To
actually,
be
I think-
adjusted.
I think you just leave the language in there the way it is, so all you'd be changing is.
Oh, it's down at the bottom. Okay, yep.
Okay, and you want to put something in about COLA?
Annual stipend of $22,500 to be adjusted annually by a COLA, by a cost of living.
Okay, Bob, does that want to come up?
Yes, a couple things on the expenses. I would suggest you add to the motion reasonable
Reasonable expenses.
expenses related to the position.
Okay.
And on COLA, you really need to specify which COLA you're talking about, because there's a COLA for everything.
Right.
I don't know, I don't have one to offer, other than say perhaps a COLA to be set by the Board of Selectmen. I mean, there needs to be an index.
Again, you're gonna run into the same problem.
Yeah, I mean.
We would usually use
How is cost of
COLA
living done
used
with
by
union?
by the federal government
Reserve?
You could
or
tie
Social
it-
Security.
You could tie it to Social
There you go.
Security.
That's
Yeah,
the one
that
we
was
do.
the
That
one.
means there's not going to be any big raises.
Adjusted annually
Well,
according to the
we don't
Social
know what's going to
Security
happen in the
COLA.
next couple of years.
That's true. But having a defined index is
Right.
otherwise it's.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, you're right, because there are a number of them out there.
Yeah. I'd feel more comfortable if you use 10% instead of 15. I think that's a pretty good, because if you go with that amount, okay, you're feeding into what the argument that Tom said. I know it doesn't seem that different, but I do think that could play against the town manager. I mean, not
I don't
that I'm in
think that- I
favor
don't
of it.
think that's enough.
Not that I'm in favor of it, but, you know, I just think.
I mean, if I'm thinking about myself as a first selectman, I think, okay, I need babysitter at night, I need gas money, I need all of these things that I have to pay for as a mom, right? Just as a straight mom, what it's going to cost me to serve in that kind of capacity.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be a mom.
It won't always
as the
be mom,
first
but it'll be
selectman.
somebody else who's got some other
Right,
expense.
could be somebody who's retired, could be somebody
It
who's
could,
a self-business
but you also don't want to
person.
foreclose people from being able to do that. And okay, as a businesswoman, I'm a businesswoman. I own my own firm. My living is a hourly rate, right? I'm giving that up in order to devote myself to being a first select woman, person, man, whatever you want to call it by the end of this. I think that 10%, if we're talking about $15,000 a year, I don't think that's sufficient to induce somebody to take on the extra costs or give up the income that you would otherwise earn.
But
I'd meet you at
again, you're changing the role.
flat.
You are changing the role of first selectman. They're the chairman of the board. So they won't be, if we look at today's first selectman and then their involvement, a lot of that goes to the town manager. So we're not asking them to spend as much time as they normally would.
Correct.
And so, and the expectation probably is that they do have a full-time job or have some retirement or some other form of income, that this would just complement and pay for what they needed to do to spend their time. It wasn't meant to cover everything.
No, of course not.
It was just meant to be, as we said,
Right.
a stipend.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to go with, expenses only.
I want to go higher. I think it should be more.
To the extent that we're talking about not revisiting issues that we have already visited, and I'm on board with that, we're you and Mary have convinced me that we're already down this path, we need to continue down this path. But by the same token, we already visited this concept of 15%. We had ample discussion about that, and I think that we should stick with approximately 15% of the town managers as a base stipend for the first selectman going forward.
Well, there is a motion on the floor, in fact.
And there's a second.
Which we need to vote down.
What? No, yours.
Well, mine was already seconded.
And I'll do
Your
another
motion, which
friendly
was
amendment
amended.
on myself and say 20,000 instead of 22.5.
No, just keep it. I'm not going to support that.
You're not going to support, okay, 22.5.
We can vote on that. Mary seconded it. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I do. I have, looking at it, putting it in an outside hat on too, it could go either way. If we're talking about trying not to muddle or keep it clean, and there are arguments for both sides of putting a definitive number on it and of having nothing on it. I'm concerned that when the voters look at this, they're going to think, where did you come up with this number? And this is not the purpose of having someone in that position, because you're already spending X amount for a town manager, and then they may think the total cost is going back to another discussion that we're spending more to get this, but in the, not looking at the long run down the years or what have you, that we would be saving money. On the other hand, looking at it this way, that when you do have a stipend of a significant number or a number higher than, you also elevate that position, into that. It gives a little bit more credibility to that. I would hope credibility to that position, that person coming into that. So there really are two arguments of looking at it. It could be way. And again, how is the public going to perceive that?
But if we don't put a number in, then we're back to the Board of Selectmen. We have to pick one or the other. You either have to say, we're going to let it fluctuate with the Board of Selectmen. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. Let it fluctuate with the Board of Selectmen, and it could be used to the benefit or the detriment, as the board wishes, or you put a number in. So I think we should start with a number. I think the public should know, that we were paying more for selectmen, and we're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to get a professional for $22,000 or $75,000. So let the public. I think Mr. Rinaldi's suggestion of a public debate is a good one. This is a big change, and people need. It's a big change, and it's not. I think people probably didn't understand how the town was being run to begin with. So it'll be an education, I think. But I feel more comfortable putting it in, letting people who are going to run know what they're getting, letting the public know when they're voting what they're going to get and what it's going to cost, and let the voters decide whether it's worth it.
I think the Board of Selectmen's problem was that they didn't want to have the first select person recused. So they wanted us to say, this is what we should recommend. Right. They want us to come up with something. So I think it should be specific. Frankly, if anybody is really looking at town expenses and budgets and stuff, and what's the budget of the town of Simsbury?
About $100 million.
Okay, and I think
Including
if anybody looks at it and says, gee, $5,000 additional to the Board of Selectmen is going to screw this for me, I don't see that. It's this. It's not worth mentioning, frankly. So I'm in support of the 15% with the COLA, or the 22. You want to
$22,500 annual stipend to be adjusted according to the Social Security Index cost of living.
I'm supportive of that. Any other discussion? Okay, ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hands.
I'll go along with it.
Okay. Passes 2, 4, 6.
That was a good debate.
Yeah. Especially the 5. I'm glad you put that in. I might not have voted.
Yeah, the 500. Yeah, that was.
If it was 22, I would have said no. Now that 500 did it for me.
We would have fought.
My
Okay.
is coming through here.
So as far as town manager, we're done with that. Paul, do you have
Just before you
something?
close out the meeting,
Okay,
I got
sure.
one thing I want to
Go back
say.
to EDC.
We have to go back to EDC.
And I have one point on that.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
No. Okay.
No, what's her?
I just wanted term to be specified in this as well, because right now we have a term of 5 years, and I.
And let me just, if you want me just, along with that, there are 2 sections that would continue to apply. The first one is section 301B, which says that unless otherwise determined by the Connecticut General Statutes, regular and alternate members, all elected, regular and permanent appointed boards, commissions, and agencies created by the charter, et cetera, that serve a 4-year term of office. All right, so it would still be covered by 301B, and the other section is section 203, I believe, which is the minority representation requirement would still apply.
So does that mean that people want a 4-year term on the EDC, or do we want it to be specified by the Board of Selectmen in their ordinance?
If you do want it specified, then we have to take it out of that other section. We have to create an exception for it.
I would prefer that because, some of the discussions we had before about the advantage of taking out of the charter was that the Board of Selectmen could convene commissions on a more short-term basis and have greater flexibility and perhaps greater participation by different people in town if they're not stuck to a 4 or 5-year term. So I prefer to say, put the term to be decided by the Board of Selectmen in this as well and take it out of 301B.
Anybody?
That's what sold me on the whole thing.
We make the motion. We need a motion on this?
Why don't you make a motion?
Wait, okay. I move that we adopt as permanent language in the charter, the Board of Selectmen shall create by ordinance an economic development commission, which shall have the membership, duties, term, and responsibilities not inconsistent with this charter or state law as determined by such ordinance.
Bob, does that cover us?
I would probably add Section 301B shall not apply.
I would suggest that in 301B, you make the change, except for the Economic
That's the
Development
easier way of doing
Commission
it.
Okay.
established in Section 609.
Okay.
So
That's fine, that's good.
Okay. What he said. And,
Yeah.
And what Bob said.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Paul is first. He's got it. Any discussion? No? All those in favor? Passes unanimously?
Can I talk for a minute about what next?
Yeah, yes, you may.
In my
We know that already.
In my opinion, you've made 2 substantive changes tonight from the current draft. And although you've approved the draft, I really think the best way forward is to hold to your meeting Monday. It doesn't need to be a long meeting, but we put in front of you the final report, the final revised charter. You vote on that, you send it off to the Board of Selectmen, because otherwise, if you don't meet again, it's a little squishy as to how those changes got made, and you don't have, we could send it to you, but you as a body don't have the ability to vote on it outside of a meeting. You can participate telephonically under FOI. Yep.
Okay.
You could do a conference call for those who can't be here because of vacations or whatever.
Can
But
we
then
vote telephonically?
You can vote telephonically, yes. I've actually been at FOI Commission meetings where members have voted telephonically. So then you got a clean set of minutes. Everybody can look back years from now and find out what exactly it was you approved, and that goes on to. And incidentally, it was raised about education. The resolution that gets adopted by the Board of Selectmen also includes a section authorizing the town to spend money on explanatory text, which the town did the last 4 times, 3 times when it actually went on to the voters. So there is that ability to put together comprehensive explanatory text and mail it out to every voter in the town. So that's not really your job, but that does happen.
Yeah, they could do it by emails as well and everything else, so there's other ways.
Helen, can you see a head count now as to who can be here for
Yeah,
sure on Monday?
I can make it on Monday. Who else can
Make it on Monday.
2, 3, 4.
I don't know.
Well, can you make it by telephone?
But we don't know about Jeff
We don't know about Jeff and Jim.
and Jim.
Jim's away for some time.
You're going to need 6 people to
Right.
participate to take a vote.
Right. Well, I'm saying, can you guys, to those people who
phone?
can't be here physically, can you phone in, do you think?
Who are we missing?
I may not be coherent. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's a big straight line, Melissa.
Thank you for your honesty.
Right.
Is there a better day next week?
Well, who's coming? Who can come Monday? We need 6?
Well, we need 6, but
We have
we
1,
have
2.
4 that I saw.
Oh, we have 4.
I'm
Jeff, I don't know.
I mean, why don't we just, you could send something out. I mean, I'm
Right.
in town all week, a rarity, but I'm in town all week.
Don't have to wait till Monday if you could.
If you want to do it this week, we will do what we need to do.
I can't do it this week.
Okay. Can anybody else? Well,
I can do it Friday.
We don't need you. Do we do it as, do we
I don't
have
need
6
you
who can
either.
make it this week? Who can be around this week? Any day?
Thursday,
Friday.
Friday.
I cannot make Thursday or Friday.
Okay.
can we do a morning? I mean,
You can do a morning.
I can do,
I can probably make next Monday, coherently.
okay, next Monday. You could make it. Paul
Then
can
do
make it.
7:30 in the morning. I don't recommend anything earlier because you do have to give public access.
No,
to
I wouldn't make, I'm not making it any earlier than 7:30. Trust me, not going to happen. Not going to happen. So Monday, if you think you might be able to make it.
More like
Paul, you can.
I can make it.
Lydia, you can. I can. That's 4, 5. We need 6. It's going to be very iffy.
We'll reach out to Jim and Jeff and
Yeah,
see if
we'll
we
find out.
have our
Well, we
people.
have a meeting scheduled. Okay, we'll see if we can get 6 to commit. If they can, everybody else knows.
If it rains, I can be
We're not
here.
going to change anything dramatically. either.
If it rains, I can be here, and if
Okay.
If I'm here
What we'll
because
do
of
is
that-
We'll email everybody to let them know. And if we can't get everybody to enough people to commit on Monday, we will then send out email and do some dates. Bob, what date do we have up until to respond to the board? Bob,
You can hang around?
Receipt.
So that was,
June 27th. July 11th was when you had the joint meeting, which is, I think, what we were using.
July 11th was the date
So I
of
think it's
receipt.
So we need, and 30 days from then is our outlier?
Yes.
Okay, so sometime, I'm sure, if we can't do it on Monday, sometime in the next 2 weeks.
If we can do it before August 8th, that is the next meeting of the Board of Selectmen. and
I'm
that
sorry,
will-
what'd you say? I didn't-
August 8th is the
Right,
next
okay.
board meeting for the Board of Selectmen.
We should be able to get 6 people together between now and then. If we can't get guaranteed on Monday, we'll just send out an email with alternate dates.
Look
and
for
once we
alternate
get
dates.
six.
Yeah.
Right.
5:30
Okay.
again?
Yep.
Okay, now,
Right.
Paul, you got
I
something you
have
wanted
one
to say?
issue, well, actually, one comment. I often don't comment on things people have said in public audience, all right? I've done that for years. I'll try to answer their questions,
Typically, neither do I.
but I won't comment on some of the things. And over the last, particularly I heard that tonight, was a comment around somebody who ran for first selectman last time around. And I didn't like the tone of the comments that this person was not qualified to even run for first selectman. Let me give you a little background on this person, okay? No, I'm not going to say his name. People can look it up. This person is a Navy veteran, somebody who served in Afghanistan, somebody who has a college education using the GI Bill, somebody who also has 2 master's degrees, including a master in public administration, which is exactly what we would look for in a town manager. Happened to be young, but that's the way it goes. Is a Simsbury resident, married Simsbury resident, recently got married. So those comments that this person was not qualified to either run for first selectman or to be a first selectman, I think was totally irresponsible, not a fair comment to somebody who served their country in Afghanistan, and somebody who, I think would be a fine town manager in the future. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
You submitting his resume for
And
town manager?
we will confirm dates and all that in the next day or two.
All right, thank you.
Jeff and